My husband forgot our anniversary. Again. I told myself it didn't matter, that 12 years of marriage doesn't need a date circled in red to prove it's real. I told myself a lot of things that morning, standing in the kitchen with 2 cups of coffee going cold on the counter, one for me and one for a man who had already left for work before I woke up. On the counter, propped against the fruit bowl like an afterthought, was his phone, buzzing with a text I probably shouldn't have read but did anyway, because that's what a wife of 12 years allows herself when the ache of being forgotten sits low in her stomach like a stone. Sorry. Busy day star. That was it. 4 words for the anniversary of the day I promised to love him through everything. I stood there holding my coffee, watching the steam curl up and disappear, and I thought about all the anniversaries before this one, the flowers he used to leave on my pillow when we were young and broke and he'd buy them from the gas station because that was all he could afford, the year he surprised me with a weekend in the mountains when Chloe was just a baby and my mother watched her so we could remember what it felt like to be just us. I thought about how somewhere between then and now, the space between us had grown quiet in a way that unsettled me more than any argument ever could. I am a photographer. I spend my days noticing what other people miss, the flicker of hesitation before someone smiles for the camera, the way grief sits differently in a jaw than exhaustion does, the truth hiding just beneath a composed face. It is strange, the things you can see so clearly through a lens and still miss entirely in your own home. I hadn't wanted to admit how far Ryan had drifted these past few months. The late nights. The phone he started keeping face down. The way he'd stare out the window during dinner like he was somewhere else entirely, somewhere I couldn't follow. I told myself it was stress. A hard quarter at work. The slow erosion that happens to every marriage eventually, the kind you're supposed to fight through with patience and grace. That evening, I went out to the garage to grab the recycling bin, and that's when I saw it. In the back seat of his car, wrapped in delicate cellophane, was the largest bouquet of white roses and ranunculus I had ever seen. Not the gas station kind. Not even close. This was the kind of arrangement that costs more than a month of my camera insurance, tied with a white ivory ribbon, the paper crisp and unwrinkled like it had been placed there with real care. Beside it, in a small velvet box, sat a pair of earrings. Diamonds, teardrop-shaped, the kind of thing I'd once pointed out in a shop window years ago and never mentioned again because I knew we couldn't afford it. And tucked into the flowers, a card. Blank on the outside. No name. I stood in that garage for a long time with my hand pressed against the cool metal of the car door, feeling something crack open inside my chest. He forgot our anniversary. He sent me 4 words. And yet he had gone somewhere, to someone, and spent money we didn't have on flowers more beautiful than anything he'd given me in years. I didn't say anything that night. I lay beside him in bed listening to him breathe, evenly, easily, like a man with nothing on his conscience, and I hated him a little for how peaceful he looked. I hated myself more for the thoughts spinning through my head, images I couldn't stop conjuring, another woman's hands opening that card, another woman's ears wearing those earrings, another woman hearing the things he used to whisper to me in the dark. By morning I had made a decision. I would follow him. I told myself it was insane even as I did it, dropping Chloe at school and doubling back to wait 3 blocks from his office, my camera bag on the passenger seat like some kind of evidence kit I was assembling against my own husband. When he came out just after 11, the bouquet in his arms, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I followed him across town, past the neighborhoods I recognized, into ones I didn't, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. He parked outside a building I didn't know, sleek and modern, glass doors reflecting the gray sky. I watched him get out, hesitate for a moment with the flowers pressed against his chest like something fragile, and then walk toward the entrance. And that's when I saw her. She came out to meet him before he even reached the doors, a woman maybe a few years younger than me, achingly beautiful in the way that makes you feel instantly smaller, her hair pulled back loosely, wearing a soft gray cardigan that looked expensive and worn all at once. She saw him and her whole face changed, crumbled really, like something in her had been holding on by a thread and his presence cut it loose. He handed her the flowers. She took them, and then she was crying, her shoulders shaking, and he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her the way he used to wrap his arms around me when I couldn't stop crying after my father died. He held her like that for a long time, his hand moving slowly against her back, murmuring something I couldn't hear from where I sat. I don't remember deciding to pick up my camera. I only remember that my hands did it for me, some automatic reflex of a woman who documents things for a living, and I photographed them through the windshield, click after click, the zoom lens bringing every devastating detail into focus, his hand on her back, her face pressed into his shoulder, the tenderness in the way he held her like he was afraid she might break. I drove home in a fog. I don't remember the roads. I only remember arriving in my own driveway and sitting there with the engine off, staring at the photographs on my camera screen, feeling something I can only describe as grief. Not rage exactly. Grief. The particular grief of watching 12 years of your life rearrange themselves into a story you never agreed to be part of. That night, going through his jacket pocket for loose change to add to Chloe's piggy bank, a small domestic ritual that suddenly felt absurd, performing normalcy while my whole world tilted sideways, I found the receipt from the flower shop, $94 for the bouquet. And on the back, in his handwriting, an address. Nothing else. No note, no name, just numbers, and a street I didn't recognize, written in the hurried scrawl of a man jotting something down before he forgot it. I told myself I would go there the next morning, and I did, before I even let myself think too hard about what I might find. I told Chloe I had an early shoot. I drove with the receipt on the passenger seat like a map to the center of my own unraveling. The building wasn't an apartment complex. It wasn't a hotel, or an office, or anything I had let myself imagine in the sleepless hours before dawn. It was a hospice. A low brick building with soft landscaping and a quiet, careful sign near the entrance, the kind of place designed to make endings feel gentler than they are. I sat in the parking lot for almost 20 minutes before I made myself go inside. And there, in the second room down a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and something floral trying too hard to cover it, I found Ryan sitting beside a hospital bed, holding the hand of the woman from the day before. She looked different in that light. Thinner than I'd registered through the windshield, the fluorescent glow catching the hollows beneath her eyes, and 4 lying taped gently to the back of her hand. She looked up when I appeared in the doorway, and there was a flicker of something in her face, recognition, maybe, or resignation, like she'd known this moment would come eventually. "Nat," Ryan said, standing so fast his chair scraped against the floor. His face went through several emotions in the space of a second, surprise, fear, something that looked almost like relief. "I'm Emily," the woman said quietly, before he could finish. "His sister." The word landed strangely, refusing to make sense at first, the way information does when it contradicts everything you've spent the last 2 days convincing yourself was true. Sister. Ryan didn't have a sister that I knew of, not one who was ever mentioned, not one who ever appeared in the stories he told about growing up, about holidays, about the family that raised him. In 12 years of marriage, he had never once said her name. I must have looked as lost as I felt, because Ryan came toward me slowly, the way you'd approach someone standing near a ledge. "We haven't spoken in almost 6 years, he said. "We had a falling out after our parents died. Over the house, it doesn't even matter anymore, it was stupid, it was pride, it was 2 people too stubborn to be the first to call." He glanced back at Emily, and something in his face softened in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in longer than I wanted to admit. 3 months ago she called me. Told me she'd been diagnosed. Stage 4. She didn't want anyone to know, not our aunts, not old family friends, nobody. She was ashamed of how sick she'd gotten before she said anything, ashamed of everything between us, and she made me promise not to tell a soul, especially not. He stopped there, but I understood. Especially not me. Especially not the wife he wasn't sure how to explain any of this to, the wife he'd have to eventually tell that he had a sister he'd erased from his own history out of anger, a sister now dying in a hospice bed while he tried to make up for 6 lost years in the only weeks they had left. "The flowers," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "The earrings." "She used to collect earrings like that," Ryan said, and his voice cracked in a way I'd never heard before, not even at his own father's funeral. "When we were kids. She'd steal Mom's magazines and circle the ones she wanted someday, when she had money of her own." I remembered. I don't even know why I remembered, but I did, and I wanted her to have something beautiful before. He couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I looked at Emily, at the fragile, fierce dignity in the way she held herself despite everything her body was doing to her, and I felt something in my chest that felt indistinguishable from shame. I had spent 2 days constructing a story of betrayal out of Ryan's silence, and the whole time, he had been carrying something so much heavier than an affair, the weight of a dying sister, a fractured family, a secret he'd promised to keep even from me, even at the cost of what it might do to us. "I'm so sorry," I said, and I wasn't sure if I was saying it to Ryan, or to Emily, or to myself, for how quickly I had believed the worst. Emily managed a small, tired smile. "Don't be. If I were you, I probably would have thought the same thing." Her eyes moved to Ryan, and something passed between them, some old current of shared history finally beginning to run again after years of silence. "He's a good husband. He just doesn't know how to ask for help. Never has." Later, out in the hallway, away from Emily's room, Ryan finally let himself break down, not loudly, not dramatically, just quiet tears he tried to wipe away before I could see them, though of course I did. "I was trying to protect everyone," he said. "Emily, from people knowing before she was ready. You, from the weight of it, from watching me fall apart over someone I'd spent years pretending didn't matter to me anymore. I thought I could carry it by myself. I thought that was the right thing to do." He looked at me then, really looked at me, in a way he hadn't in months, and I ended up hurting the person I loved most. I forgot our anniversary because I was here, sitting with her, trying to make up for years I can't get back, and I couldn't tell you why because I promised her I wouldn't, and every day that went by, the lie just got heavier, and I didn't know how to put it down without breaking everything. I thought about the photographs still sitting on my camera, the ones I'd taken through a windshield with a heart full of suspicion, capturing what I was so certain was evidence of betrayal. In truth, I had photographed something entirely different, a man trying, imperfectly and too late, to love his sister back into his life before he ran out of time to do it. Grief disguised as guilt. Tenderness mistaken for desire. "You should have told me," I said, because it was true, because even good intentions can hollow out a marriage if they're built entirely out of silence. "I would have carried it with you. That's what I'm here for." "I know that now," he said. "I'm sorry it took almost losing you to remember it." We stood together in that quiet hallway for a long moment, the hum of hospital equipment somewhere behind the walls, the particular stillness of a place built for endings. And then, without needing to say anything more, we walked back into Emily's room together, side by side, the distance between us smaller than it had been in months. She was awake when we came in, watching us with an expression that looked almost amused, like she'd known all along we would find our way back to each other before we did. I pulled a chair up beside Ryan's, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, I let myself simply sit there, not investigating, not suspecting, not photographing anything through the safety of a lens, just present, just there, the way a wife is supposed to be when her husband is quietly falling apart. Driving home that evening, I kept thinking about how close I had come to believing a lie of my own making, how easily suspicion had filled the space where trust should have been, how the human mind reaches instinctively for the story that hurts the most because somehow that's the one that feels most believable. I thought about the earrings meant for a dying woman's ears, the flowers bought not out of guilt but out of love too long withheld, the sister erased from a decade of stories because of pride neither of them knew how to swallow. Sometimes the secrets that hurt us aren't born from betrayal. They're born from fear. And I couldn't help wondering, turning it over again and again in my mind as the streetlights slid past the windshield, if I were someone else watching this story unfold from the outside, a stranger given only the flowers, the earrings, the blank card, the tears in a stranger's arms, what would I have believed? What would any of us have believed, standing where I stood, seeing only the surface of something so much deeper than it appeared?